On a snowy upstate New York night, I left my resume on the counter of a 24/7 diner. 3 hours later, a private number called. "Does this resume belong to you?" At midnight, a helicopter blade ripped through the snow outside my motel window. A man stepped out, claiming to be the grandfather I never knew. He said, "Tonight, we take back everything they stole from you. We start with the name they used to hold you down." My name is Zoe Foster. 3 days ago, I was a senior risk analyst at Helio Quarry Brands. Tonight, I was just a woman in a cheap motel room, staring at a snowstorm, wondering how my life had unspooled so quickly. The drive from Boston had been a surrender. I'd left the city limits just as the first serious snow began to stick, pushing my sedan north toward the blurred line of the Adirondacks. River Forge was a town you went to when you wanted the grid to forget you. It was pine trees, mountains, and weak cell service. After the last 3 months at Helio Quarry, a sprint of acquisitions and regulatory deadlines that had bled into 90-hour weeks, I needed the silence. I needed the anesthesia of the cold. My body was still vibrating with the phantom hum of the office. The burnout was more than just fatigue. It was an erosion. I felt thin, stretched transparent, my relationships, my apartment, my health. I had fed all of it into the corporate grinder, and I had nothing left to show for it but a dull ache behind my eyes and a paycheck that barely covered the cost of existing in Boston. The diner appeared through the curtain of snow around 10 p.m., a low, flat building buzzing with neon, advertising open 24/7. It was the only sign of life for miles. I needed coffee. I needed a moment to think that was not my car and not yet a motel. I took the resume with me. It felt stupid, carrying a CV into a roadside diner, but it was the only solid thing I had left. It was 3 pages of proof that I existed, that I was competent. I had spent the last week polishing it, tweaking the kerning, agonizing over verb choice. It was my lifeboat. I slid into a cracked vinyl booth. The diner smelled of old coffee and frying oil. A young waiter, Noah, maybe 20, nodded at me and poured a cup of dark liquid without asking. "Just coffee," he asked. "Just coffee and a quiet corner," I said. I spread the pages on the Formica table. Zoe Ilara Foster, 31. My entire professional life distilled into bullet points. I uncapped a pen, a heavy, steel one I'd kept from my first real job, and made the final notation in the margin of the cover letter I'd attached. Available for relocation within 10 days. It was a lie. I could be ready in 1, but 10 days sounded professional. It sounded like I had options, like I was moving towards something better, not just fleeing the wreckage. I was reading the contractual risk management section for the dozenth time when my phone buzzed on the table. A text, not from Mason, my boyfriend, who had been conspicuously silent all day. It was an automated alert from my apartment management company in Boston. Alert. Your smart lock access code has been successfully changed. Welcome to your new settings. I stared at the screen. I hadn't changed my code. I called the management company immediately. The line clicked to an after-hours answering service. I called Mason, straight to voicemail. I texted him. My fingers suddenly numb. "Did you change the apartment code?" A second text came through. This one was from the building's front desk security. "Ms. Foster, per your request, your cousin Kira Hale has been given primary access. My request." The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. The exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. I threw a $10 bill on the table, scooped up my phone and my keys, and bolted, leaving the 3 pages of my pristine resume sitting next to the half-full cup of coffee. I was halfway to the car before I realized it, and by then the snow was coming down too hard. I couldn't go back. It was just paper. Inside the diner, Noah cleared the cup. He picked up the resume, whistled softly at the heavy linen paper. It looked important. He glanced at the door, but my taillights were already disappearing. He shrugged and placed the stack by the antique coffee grinder on the back counter, figuring he'd toss it when he cleaned up. An hour later, another man entered the diner. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, and wore a dark gray, perfectly tailored suit under a heavy cashmere coat. He did not look like he belonged in Riverforge. He looked like he owned it. He sat at the counter, ignoring the menu. "Coffee? Black?" he said. His voice was quiet, but carried over the hum of the refrigerators. While Noah poured, the man's gaze drifted. It landed on the resume by the grinder. He reached over, his cufflink glinting. He did not ask permission. He picked up the first page. Noah watched him. The man wasn't skimming. He was reading. His focus was absolute, his expression neutral, until he reached the second page. His eyes narrowed slightly. He traced one of the bullet points under strategic oversight with a clean fingernail. He read the contractual risk management section twice. He looked at the name again. Zoe Alara Foster. He took out his phone, looked at the resume, and typed a query. He waited. Then, he dialed. I found the only motel in Riverforge with a vacancy sign still lit. The Mountain View Inn was a single-story block of concrete that faced a poorly plowed parking lot. The room cost $65, cash, and smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, the thin blanket pulled around my shoulders. My phone pressed to my ear. Voicemail, 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 the management company, the security desk, Mason, even my cousin Kira. No one answered. I was locked out. My belongings, my entire life, were in an apartment I suddenly had no access to, with my cousin and my boyfriend playing house inside. The betrayal was so sudden, so complete, that my mind couldn't quite grasp it. It felt abstract, like a problem at work, a risk scenario I needed to model. That's when the phone rang, vibrating hard against my ear. "Private number." I almost declined it, assuming it was a spam call, but the dread pushed my thumb to the screen. I answered. "Hello." Silence for a beat, then a man's voice, impossibly calm and precise, cultured, old money. "Am I speaking with Zoe Alara Foster?" My blood stopped. No one used my middle name, ever. I hadn't even put it on the resume. I'd only used the initial, Z.E. Foster. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice tight. "My name is Elias Rothwell," the man said. "I am holding your resume. It was left at the diner on Route 28. I sank back onto the pillow. A stranger, a headhunter, oh I. "Yes, I left it. I'm sorry. How did you know my middle name?" "It is an impressive document," he continued, ignoring my question. "You detail extensive experience in third-party vendor negotiations and sovereign compliance. And you also," he paused, "you have 2 intentional misspellings." The air left my lungs. "A subtle M missing in government contracts, and you've transposed the I and E in strategic implementation. They are clever traps, digital watermarks, I presume, used to track unauthorized distribution." I sat bolt upright. I used those typos to create unique identifiers. I sent different versions to different recruiters. If this man had this version, with those specific flaws— "Who gave you that resume?" I demanded. "It was abandoned," he said simply. "But the typos tell me you are careful. They tell me you expect duplicity. That is a rare and valuable trait." "I don't understand. What do you want?" "Mr. Rothwell." I tried again, my mind racing. "I appreciate the call, but it's late, and This resume, Ms. Foster," he interrupted, his voice still perfectly level, "is worth flying through a blizzard for." I didn't know what that meant, a metaphor. But before I could ask, I heard it. It started not as a sound, but as a vibration in the cheap window frame. A low, deep pulse. Thwump, thwump, thwump. It was a mechanical rhythm that cut through the hiss of the snow. "What is that sound?" I asked. "That," Elias Rothwell said, "is your transportation. I am in the parking lot. Please pack your bag." He hung up. I scrambled off the bed, pulling the curtain aside. The parking lot was gone. It was replaced by an impossible, blinding white light. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was swirling in a violent, horizontal vortex. The sound was deafening now. A physical weight pressing against the motel. A helicopter, a massive, sleek, black helicopter was settling onto the asphalt. Its landing skids barely 10 yards from my door. The rotor wash was a hurricane, tearing at the motel's loose shingles. The night clerk, the same kid who had checked me in, was standing in the open doorway of the office, his jaw hanging open. He was holding his phone up, recording. Completely stunned. The engine noise shifted, dropping in pitch. A door slid open. A figure stepped out onto the skid and dropped lightly to the ground. He didn't bend against the wind. He just walked through it, the blades still turning above him. It was the man from the diner, the gray suit, the cashmere coat. He walked directly to my door, his face calm in the strobe of the landing lights. He knocked. 2 sharp, solid raps. I fumbled with the chain, my hands shaking. I opened the door. Elias Rothwell stood there. He was older up close, his face etched with lines of authority, not kindness. His eyes were a pale, piercing gray, and they took in my face, the cheap room behind me, and the phone still clutched in my hand. "Ms. Foster," he said, his voice perfectly audible over the idling engines. "We spoke. Who are you?" He reached inside his coat. He did not produce a business card. He produced a heavy cream-colored envelope. "I believe this provides the necessary context," he said. I took it. Inside was a photograph, not a printout, but a real, silver halide photograph, thick and glossy. It was 30 years old. A young woman, beautiful and defiant, stood on the deck of a sailboat. She looked exactly like me. She was laughing. Standing next to her, his hand possessively on her shoulder, was a much younger Elias Rothwell. It was my mother, who had died when I was 20. My mother, who had always told me her parents were not in the picture, that they had disowned her for marrying my father. She had raised me alone, on a teacher's salary, telling me we had no one else. "You knew my mother," I whispered, the photo shaking in my hand. "She was my daughter," Elias said. His face softened, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of an ancient pain. "I am your grandfather. We have been estranged by circumstance, by choices made long ago, not by my desire." He looked past me, at the motel room, then back at my face. "And I find you here, 31 years old, a brilliant resume in your hand, and locked out of your own life by petty thieves." He knew. I didn't know how he knew, but the certainty in his voice was absolute. "I don't understand," I said. It was the only thing I could say. He nodded toward the waiting helicopter, the open door. "I did not fly through a blizzard to reminisce. Zoe, I came to correct an error." He stepped back, holding the motel door open for me. "Get your coat," he said, his voice flat, resolute. "We are going to Boston. It is time to see the things that actually belong to you." The flight was a rupture in time. The helicopter cabin was pressurized and quiet. The rotor blades a dull thrum far above us. We flew over the storm, not through it. Elias Rothwell did not speak. He sat opposite me, belted into a cream-colored leather seat, reading a dense financial report as if we were on a commuter train. He hadn't asked about my mother, my life, or the 31 years he had missed. He had confirmed his identity, assessed my resume, and taken possession of my circumstances. I watched the ice crystals form on the reinforced glass, my mind struggling to stitch the two realities together. The grandfather I never knew was a billionaire, and my boyfriend and cousin were, apparently, thieves. The betrayal from Mason and Kira was a sharp, mundane pain. The appearance of Elias was something else entirely vast, cold, and incomprehensible, like the atmosphere at 30,000 feet. We landed at a private airfield north of Boston when the sky was a deep, bruised purple. Not yet dawn, maybe 4 a.m., a black sedan, identical to the ones that wait for CEOs, was idling on the tarmac. The driver took my single overnight bag. We drove into the city. The streets were empty. slick with sleet. The silence in the car was heavy, expectant. "They believe you are weak," Elias said, looking straight ahead as the car turned onto my street. "They believe you are isolated. They are counting on a hysterical reaction followed by a quiet retreat. It is what my daughter, your mother, would have done. She always chose retreat." The words stung, a calculated prick of my pride. "I am not my mother," I said. "That is what the resume suggests," he replied. "Now, we will see." The lobby of my building was warm, the overnight security guard asleep at his desk. We took the elevator to the 12th floor. Elias remained 2 steps behind me, an observer. I walked down the familiar carpeted hallway to my apartment, 1214. The smart lock on my door looked different. The faceplate was new, a more expensive model than the one the building provided. My key fob, when I held it up, resulted in a sharp, negative beep 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 and a red light. My access code. My mother's birthday. I typed it in. Access denied. Rage. Cold and pure. Washed over the shock. I balled my fist and struck the door. Not a panicked pounding, but 3 heavy, measured blows. I heard movement inside. Muffled voices. A chain being drawn. The deadbolt turned. The door opened 4 inches. My cousin, Kira Hale, peered out. Her blonde hair was a mess from sleep. She was wearing my gray silk robe, the one Mason had given me for Christmas. Her eyes widened, first in surprise, then in a slow, dawning satisfaction. "Zoe, my God, what are you doing here? It's the middle of the night. Why is the lock changed? Kira, where is Mason?" "He's asleep," she lied. Pulling the robe tighter, I pushed the door. She stumbled back, and I stepped into the entryway of my own apartment, and my world tilted. It was my apartment, but it was wrong. The smell was wrong. It smelled like Mason's mother. Cynthia, a heavy gardenia perfume. My large abstract painting from the entryway was gone, replaced by a cheap, gilt-framed mirror. My coat rack was overflowing with coats I didn't recognize. In the living room, my modular sofa had been rearranged, my books, my possessions. My entire life had been packed into a dozen cardboard banker's boxes stacked against the far wall. Labeled in Kira's sloppy handwriting, Zoe, storage, Mason was in the kitchen, illuminated by the light over the stove. He was wearing boxers and a t-shirt, stirring something in a saucepan. He froze when he saw me, the spoon halfway to his mouth. "Zoe," he breathed. He looked pale, guilty, and terrified. "What is this?" I demanded. My voice was steady, lower than I expected. "What did you do?" "Honey, who is it?" A voice called from my bedroom. Mason's mother, Cynthia Dallow, emerged, tying the belt on her own bathrobe. She stopped dead. Behind her, Mason's father, in pajamas, squinted at me. They were living here, all of them. Cynthia was the first to recover. She put on a look of strained pity. "Zoe, we didn't expect you back. We thought you'd be in Riverforge for the week." "You changed my locks," I said. Kira stepped up beside me, her arms crossed. The fear was gone, replaced by a brazen smirk. "We had to. Zoe, you just left. You abandoned the lease. I went upstate for 2 days," I said, my voice vibrating. "You took your resume," Kira countered, gesturing to the empty spot on the hall table where I usually dropped my work bag. "You were clearly planning on leaving. You've been complaining about Helioquarry brands for months. When we saw you'd packed..." "You packed my things," I stated. "We were just helping." Kira's voice rose, theatrical. "Mason was so worried. He told us you were breaking down. So we came to help. We're just keeping the place warm until you figure things out." The gaslighting was so profound, so complete. It was almost brilliant. They had created a narrative where I was the unstable one, the one who had fled, and they were the rescuers. "Get out," I said. "No," Mason's father said, stepping forward. He was a large man, used to intimidating people. "We have a right to be here." "A right?" I looked at Mason. He was staring intently at the contents of his saucepan, refusing to meet my eyes. "Show her. Kira," Cynthia said, smoothing her robe. Kira walked to my dining table. On it, next to a stack of their mail that had been redirected here, was a single printed document. "It's all legal. Zoe, we signed a new co-lease agreement with the building. Mason handled it." I picked up the paper. It was a standard tenancy addendum. It listed Mason Dallow and Kira Hale as primary tenants, and me, Zoe Foster, as a departing occupant, and at the bottom, next to their signatures, was mine. My e-signature. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a forgery, not in the traditional sense. It was a perfect, high-resolution copy, a digital clone. I knew exactly where it came from. 3 months ago, I had signed an executive NDA for a sensitive project at Helio Quarry. The file had been too large for the e-sign portal, and Mason, an IT consultant, had offered to help. He said he needed to extract my signature as a transparent vector file to overlay it on the PDF. I had trusted him. He had saved a copy. "This is fraud," I said, the words tasting like ash. "That's your signature," Kira chirped. "The management company accepted it." "Mason," I said, holding the paper out. "Mason, look at me." He finally looked up. His eyes were shot through with red. He looked weak. "Zoe, it just made sense. My parents sold their house. Kira's lease was up. You were never here. We needed a place. It's just an apartment. Zoe, it's my home," I whispered. "Well, it's ours now," Cynthia said. She walked past me to the main wall, where she was holding a large framed photograph. It was their family, Mason, his parents, his sister, all smiling at some beach. She lifted it to the hook where my favorite painting used to hang. "This will look much better here. It just brightens up the whole room." The casual cruelty of it, the erasure, was staggering. Kira, enjoying her victory, walked to my open wallet, which they'd tossed on top of one of the boxes. She pulled out the supplementary credit card linked to my primary checking account. "And you really need to get your finances in order, Zoe," Kira said, reading the embossed numbers. "I mean, thank God I'm here to manage things. I had to pay the electric bill yesterday." She then announced, to the room, "She's still got a $5,000 limit on this thing. Can you believe it? After all her complaining about being broke." She had logged into my bank. She had seen my accounts. The e-signature was the entry point, but the invasion was total. My gaze drifted from her, scanning the room, my analyst brain, the part of me that looks for patterns and discrepancies, finally switched on. The bookshelf in the corner. It was angled slightly inward. It wasn't flush with the wall, and tucked between a biography of Rockefeller and my old corporate finance textbooks. I saw it. A small, black, cylindrical object, a single, dark lens, a hidden camera. It was aimed at the living room. Mason, he must have put it there, to watch me, to record my breakdown, to gather evidence for their story that I was unstable. I felt the floor drop out from under me. The man I had lived with for 2 years was not just weak. He was calculating. He was malicious. I turned and walked out. I pulled the door shut behind me, leaving them in my home. Elias Rothwell was exactly where I had left him. Standing by the elevators, he had not moved. His face was unreadable. He had heard everything. The thin walls of the modern building had carried every word. I leaned against the wall, my hands shaking so violently I had to clench them into fists. "I want to call the police," I said. "You could," Elias said, his voice calm. "It would be messy. They would call it a civil dispute, a lover's quarrel. The police will see the signed lease and tell you to get a lawyer. It would take months. You would lose." He watched me, his gray eyes assessing my state. He was waiting. "Do not argue," he said, his voice a low command. "Do not give them the satisfaction of a fight. They are expecting hysterics. They have a camera in there to record it. Give them silence." He looked past me, his eyes cataloging the number on the door. "We collect the evidence chain, every piece." He reached into his breast pocket. He produced a business card. It was not his. The cardstock was imposs, models, heavy as a playing card, with crisp, engraved lettering, Harbor Pike, LLP. Below the law firm's name, someone had written in sharp, precise graphite Appendix R trigger on misrepresentation. "What is this?" I asked. "Harbor Pike are my attorneys," he said. "The notation is for you." Appendix R. The phrase echoed in my memory. It was from the Helio Quarry Brand's employee handbook, a deep cut, buried in the corporate governance section. A clause I had glanced at once during onboarding. It was a morals clause, but a specific one. It defined consequences for any employee who engaged in fraudulent conduct, misrepresentation, or identity theft, whether in a professional or personal capacity. If said conduct threatened the firm's reputation, "They used my signature," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Kira accessed my bank accounts. Mason is a senior IT consultant. He stole my digital signature from a company document. He used a privileged asset obtained during his employment to commit fraud," Elias clarified, "which triggers Appendix R, and you," he added, "are a senior analyst at the same firm. They have created a situation." He put his hand on my shoulder. It was not a gesture of comfort, it was a gesture of grounding. "Do not seek justice tonight. Zoe, justice is a sentiment. Seek leverage, now," he said, steering me toward the elevator. "We will get you a hotel room, and then you will call Harbor Pike. We will initiate a digital forensics review and a full asset lockdown. They wanted your apartment. We will ensure they are left with nothing else." I looked back at the closed door to 1214. I could hear Kira laughing inside. The shaking in my hands stopped. The cold, analytical focus I used to dissect flawed contracts settled over me. Elias Rothwell was right. They expected hysterics. I would give them strategy. We did not go to a hotel. We went to the hotel. Elias maintained a permanent suite at the top of the tallest residential building in Boston, a space of sterile, quiet luxury that was the antithesis of the motel in River Forge. It was all glass, pale wood, and views of the harbor, which was just beginning to reflect the cold gray light of 5 a.m. "You have 24 hours, Elias said, handing me a fresh, encrypted laptop. "The legal process is a hammer. It is powerful, but it is slow. The digital process is a scalpel. It must be used quickly." I sat on a sofa that cost more than my car, my adrenaline overriding my exhaustion. The analyst in me, the part that had been dormant and burned out, was coming online. The trauma of the apartment invasion was being compartmentalized. It was no longer a personal violation. It was a data breach. "First," I said, my voice hoarse, I opened the new laptop. It booted in seconds. "I secure my perimeter." I logged into my primary bank. My hands were shaking, but my keystrokes were precise. I went straight to account management. Supplementary card for Kira Hale. Access revoked. I changed my passwords, every single one. Banking, email, utilities, social media, work portal. I used the laptop's random string generator, unknowable, unguessable. Then, I set the alerts. The prompt from Kira's taunt about the $5,000 limit echoed in my head. I went to the notification settings. Alert on any transaction attempted over $50. My phone would now ping on every coffee, every cab, every desperate attempt. "They have my social security number," I said, thinking of the lease agreement. "Assume they have everything," Elias said. He was on the phone, speaking quietly to someone. "Yes, full forensic retrieval. I want the device logs, cloud backups, and a mirror of the drive. Authorization is Rothwell Priority 1. Activate them." He hung up and looked at me. "A digital forensics team from Harbor Pike is mobilizing. They will be here in 1 hour." "Before they get here," I said, "I need to check something." I logged into my personal email. Mason knew the password. I had been that stupid, that trusting. I went to my sent items. But not just the inbox. I went into the archive, the trash, the drafts, nothing. Then I checked my cloud drive, the one where I kept everything, my tax returns, my employment contracts, my resume. I opened the activity log. There it was. 2 days ago, at 3:15 p.m., Zoe CV Master V9 Exec. Downloaded by Mason Dallow. He had taken it. But he hadn't just looked at it. I cross-referenced the activity log with his email, which I also had access to, because we shared a streaming account. I logged in as him. My blood ran cold. He had emailed my resume. He had sent my entire professional history, my carefully crafted watermarks, my typo traps, to a personal, non-corporate email address. An address I recognized. Ruth Calder, my boss at Helio Quarry Brands. The betrayal wasn't just Kira's greed. It wasn't just Mason's weakness. It was a coordinated attack. My boss was involved. They weren't just taking my apartment. They were trying to sever my career. The typo traps, the missing M in government. It was all there. I now had a digital chain of custody linking my boyfriend to my boss in a conspiracy to access my private files. The doorbell chimed, not a buzzer, but a soft, expensive chime. Elias opened the door. 2 people, a man and a woman, entered. They were young, dressed in sharp, unassuming business casual, and carrying heavy silver Pelican cases. They were the digital forensics team. "Ms. Foster," the woman said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "We're here to help. We understand there's been an unauthorized access event." For the next 3 hours, I was an analyst again. I walked them through my bank accounts. I showed them the activity log on the cloud drive. I gave them the login to Mason's email. I showed them the fraudulent lease agreement with the lifted e-signature. The woman nodded, her expression grim. "The signature vector theft is clear. He likely pulled it from the NDA you mentioned. It's sloppy, but effective with a lazy building management company." "And the camera," I said, my voice low. "He installed a hidden camera in the bookshelf." The man looked up from his console. "Do you know the model? Is it Wi-Fi enabled?" "I assume so," I said. "He'd want to access the feed remotely." "Good," he said, not smiling. "If it's on your Wi-Fi network, which they presumably haven't changed yet, we can access it. We'll pull the device ID and its entire stored log. We'll see everything it saw, including him setting it up. While they worked, I made my own call. I used the Harbor Pike card Elias had given me. Harbor Pike, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with your litigation department," I said. "My name is Zoe Foster. It's regarding a property fraud and identity theft matter, referred by Elias Rothwell." The line clicked once. I was transferred to a senior partner. By 9 a.m., the counteroffensive was fully engaged. First, the lawyers from Harbor Pike, armed with my affidavit and the digital proof of the signature fraud, filed an emergency notice to quit with my building's management. It was not a request. It was a notification of immediate and incurable breach of lease. It stated that the co-lease agreement was null and void due to its fraudulent inception. Second, I personally emailed the management company, attaching my original lease agreement. I highlighted the clause I had insisted on when I moved in Section 12B, no subletting, co-leasing, or transfer of tenancy is permitted without the original lessee's wet ink signature. Any violation renders the agreement void and incurs a penalty of 2 times the monthly rent. Third, the lawyers served Mason Dallow and Kira Hale by email, by courier, and by process server with a formal litigation hold notice. This was the part I savored. The lit hold legally obligated them to preserve all electronic data. They were forbidden from deleting, altering, or destroying any text messages, emails, photos, or files on any of their devices. If they deleted a single text, it would be spoliation of evidence, a crime that carried massive legal penalties. They were trapped. The panic must have been setting in right about the time the process server banged on the door of 1214. By noon, the forensics team had a clearer picture. "It's worse than we thought," the woman said, turning her screen toward me. Kira Hale didn't just access your bank accounts. She ran a credit check on you. She showed me the alert from a credit bureau. Kira had used my social security number, which Mason had clearly supplied from my stolen files, to apply for 3 different high-limit credit cards. One was approved, the woman said. A $5,000 line of credit at a major department store. She also opened a new cell phone plan in your name. This was no longer a dispute. This was felony identity theft. Elias had been silent, watching the proceedings from the dining table. The lawyers, the forensics team, the flow of data. He observed it all like a general. The senior partner from Harbor Pike called the suite's landline. Elias put it on speaker. Mr. Rothwell, Ms. Foster, we have them, the lawyer said, his voice crisp. The signature fraud is concrete. The identity theft is a clear criminal matter. The conspiracy with the Helio Quarry employee, Ruth Calder, adds a layer of corporate malfeasance. We can have them arrested by nightfall. We can have the police remove them from the apartment immediately. It will be loud, public, and decisive. I closed my eyes. I imagined Kira in handcuffs. I imagined Mason being walked out of our lobby. I imagined the relief. But, the lawyer continued, a criminal case takes time. It moves to the DA. You lose control of the narrative. They become victims of the system. It gets messy. What is the alternative? Elias asked. A civil execution, the lawyer said. We have them on multiple felonies. We have leverage that is absolute. We can draft a resolution that gives Ms. Foster everything she wants, quietly, in the next 12 hours. Elias looked at me. His gray eyes were analytical. He was not pushing me. He was testing me. He was waiting to see what I was made of. It is your decision, Zoe, he said. The law can be a blunt instrument, or it can be a scalpel. You can have them arrested. That would be clean. What do you want, besides clean? I thought about Kira's smirk, Cynthia Dallow hanging her family photo on my wall, Mason's cowardice, the hidden camera. Clean isn't enough, I said, and my voice surprised me with its clarity. A criminal charge is public, but they can plead it down, they can cry, they can play dumb. I don't want them arrested. I leaned forward. I want public acknowledgement. I want a confession, and I want binding consequences that I control, not a district attorney. The lawyer on the phone was silent for a moment. I could almost hear him smile. Excellent, the lawyer said. In that case, we will draft a stipulated judgment. It's a settlement, but it's filed with the court. In it, they will be required to admit, in writing, to the fraudulent signature, the unauthorized access, and the identity theft. They will agree to vacate the apartment within 24 hours. They will agree to pay all legal fees, the penalties on the lease, and full restitution for the fraudulent credit. They will agree to a permanent restraining order. They will surrender all devices for a forensic wipe. And if they refuse, I asked. If they refuse, we file the criminal charges immediately. They won't refuse, the lawyer said. But here's the beauty of it. If they sign this agreement, and then violate it in any way if they miss a single payment, if they try to defame you, if they come within 500 feet of you, the judgment triggers automatically. The confession becomes a permanent, public court record, and a warrant is issued. It is a leash, and you will be holding it. Do it, I said. Send it to them now. That night, the snow began to fall again, thick and heavy, covering Boston in a blanket of white. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the suite, watching the storm. I was holding a mug of coffee. The forensics team was gone. The lawyers were finalizing the judgment. Elias was in his study, taking calls. I looked down at my hand, the one holding the mug. 6 hours ago, it had been shaking so violently I couldn't grip a pen. Now, it was perfectly still. The stipulated judgment was a bomb delivered on legal letterhead. The response was immediate. At 6 a.m., my phone, which had been silent for 2 days, lit up, not with alerts, but with the desperate, frantic calls of the trapped, Mason, Kira, Cynthia Dallow. They had 24 hours to sign, or the criminal charges would be filed. Their panic was a dull noise in the background of my new reality. I ignored the calls. My new reality was Elias Rothwell, sitting across a vast mahogany table in his suite, reading a stack of physical newspapers. He hadn't asked me about the apartment, about Mason, or about my mother. He had provided the infrastructure for my counterattack, and now he was simply observing. "You slept for 4 hours," he noted, not looking up from the Wall Street Journal. "It was enough," I said. I was dressed in a clean, severe black sheath dress I'd had the hotel's concierge purchase for me. The old Zoe was gone, the burned-out, accommodating. "Please like me," Analyst was packed away in those cardboard boxes with the rest of her life. "Your legal problem is on a timer," he said, folding the paper with a crisp snap. "They will sign. They have no choice. Your professional problem, however, is just beginning." He was right. The forensics team had confirmed Mason had sent my resume, my typo-trapped, watermarked resume, directly to Ruth Calder's personal email. My boss was, at best, complicit in a massive breach of my privacy and, at worst, an active participant in the conspiracy to oust me. "Ruth," I said. "Ruth," he agreed. "She has your resume. She knows Mason is compromised. She will assume you are compromised, a liability. She will move to sideline you before you can become a problem." "I have to go in," I said. "I can't just not show up." "You will walk in there as if nothing has happened," Elias said. "You will do your job. You will let her make the first mistake." Walking into the offices of HelioQuery Brands was like surfacing for air. The hum of the servers, the smell of stale coffee, the fluorescent lights, it was all painfully familiar. But I was seeing it with a new, cold clarity. I was no longer an employee. I was a risk analyst assessing a compromised system. People looked up as I walked to my desk. Whispers followed me. I had been offline for 2 days after a known 90-hour work sprint. The assumption was burnout. A breakdown. Ruth Calder's glass-walled office was at the head of the department. She was on the phone, but she saw me. Her eyes widened just a fraction, and the professional mask of concern snapped into place. She beckoned me in. "Zoe, my God," she said, hanging up the phone. She was a woman who lived on cortisol and expensive salads. "I've been so worried. I heard there was some incident at your apartment. Are you all right? Do you need time?" It was a test. She was probing, trying to see what I knew, how stable I was. "I'm fine, Ruth," I said, my voice even. I did not sit down. "It's a legal matter now. It's being handled." The word legal hung in the air between us. Her smile tightened. "Oh, well, good. I'm glad. We need you focused. You know how it is." "I'm focused," I said. "Good," she said, her tone shifting, all business. "Because we have a fire. We're having an all-hands in 5 minutes. Conference room B." The meeting was a formality. Ruth stood at the front, clicking through a presentation. I stood in the back, arms crossed, observing. "All right, team, the big one," she announced. "The North Alder Trust account is up for review." A nervous energy filled the room. North Alder Trust was our single largest client, a deeply private, old-money family investment fund that accounted for a massive percentage of our annual billing. Losing them would mean layoffs. "They're opening the floor to other agencies," Ruth continued. "They want a new strategy. We have the inside track. But we have to repitch them. This is code red." She looked around the room. "I want our best on this, Mark," she said, nodding to a senior colleague, a man who coasted on a firm handshake and a deep voice. "I want you to head the pitch. You have the most stable relationship with their fund managers. They trust you. It's about preserving that stability." Mark nodded, looking important. I saw the strategy immediately do nothing. Repackage the same ideas, flatter them, and rely on the old boys club relationship. "Ruth," I said. My voice cut through the room. Everyone turned. I never spoke in all-hands meetings. Ruth looked annoyed. Yes, Zoe. I'd like to be on the pitch team, I said. The silence was deafening. Ruth's expression was a perfect blend of pity and irritation. Zoe, she said condescendingly, with everything you have going on. She waved a hand vaguely. Perhaps this isn't the time to take on more. We need stability right now. Maybe you should take some personal time. She was sidelining me, using my own victimization, which she was complicit in, as the excuse. I'm fully focused, Ruth, I said, my voice like ice. I have some specific ideas on a new framework for their brand integrity. I believe their current strategy is high risk. I'd like to submit a proposal. Ruth was trapped. She couldn't publicly declare me unstable or unfit without inviting an HR complaint. She gave me a brittle smile. Fine. Of course. Submit a draft deck. I'll need it by tomorrow, end of day, to be reviewed for inclusion. An impossible deadline. She was setting me up to fail. Thank you, I said. You'll have it. I went back to the suite. I was vibrating with a cold fury. She's pushing me out, I told Elias. She's giving the account to Mark, and she gave me a 24-hour deadline to produce a full strategy deck. Elias was at the window, looking down at the harbor. North Alder Trust, he said, as if tasting the words. Yes, a huge family fund, conservative, private, based in New York. It is, he said, turning to face me. It is one of the primary branches of the Rothwell Holdings family office. Your mother's grandfather founded it. My stomach clenched. What? It is my company. Zoe, I am the chairman of the board. Ruth Calder and Mark are, in effect, pitching to me. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. It was over. So you'll fix it, I said, slumping onto the sofa. You'll call them. You'll tell them to give the account to me. You'll fire Ruth. Absolutely not. His voice was so sharp, so final. I sat bolt upright. I will not make one call, he said, walking toward me. You will not use the Rothwell name. You will not hint at any connection. Nepotism is just another form of theft. Zoe, it is the rot that destroys families and businesses. I did not fly through a storm for that. But, Elias, she's cheating. She's working with Mason. They're trying to destroy me. And you will stop them, he said. You will not win this because you are my granddaughter. You will win this because you are better than they are. You will win this the same way you are winning back your apartment with superior data and airtight strategy. Your boss thinks you are a hysterical, emotional liability. Prove you are a strategic asset. He paused, his gray eyes pinning me. She is trying to box you in with your personal life. She is attacking your boundaries, so use it. I looked at him, confused. Use what boundaries are business, he said. Your entire life was just breached because of a catastrophic lack of boundaries. You, Mason, Kira, your professional life is being threatened by a boss who has no boundaries, who feels entitled to your private files. Use that. Make your boundaries your strategy. I stared at him, and the idea, it began to form. I worked through the night. The burnout was gone, burned away by the adrenaline and the rage. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. I opened a new, blank presentation. I titled it, Project Perimeter, a Framework for Brand Integrity and Risk Mitigation. My thesis was simple. North Alder Trust was failing because it had no boundaries. It, like me, was trying to be too many things to too many people. Its brand was diluted. Its partners, like Helio Quarry, were taking advantage of the stability and delivering lazy recycled work. I created a case study. The high-performance asset. I didn't use my name. I didn't need to. I used corporate speak. An asset overperforms. I wrote, it becomes accommodating. It shares resources to foster collaboration. This accommodation is misinterpreted as weakness. Unchecked access is granted. Key intellectual property is co-opted. The asset becomes compromised. The brand is diluted. Trust is eroded. I turned my life into a business model. The apartment, the bank account, the the digital signature. Then, I built the solution, the no-scope creep framework. I went deep. I dug into HelioQuary's own project archives. I found the data on Mark's past projects, the ones that had run over budget, the ones where the client had complained about vanity spending and lack of focus. I used my risk analysis skills to model the financial drain. I found the number. The new framework, with its clear contractual delineations, digital firewalls, and quarterly boundary reviews, would eliminate this exact type of overage. I typed the final bullet point: implementation of the perimeter framework will result in an 18% reduction in non-billable scope creep and client-side attrition. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't my personal drama. It was data. It was an ironclad, numbers-backed argument that proved their current stable strategy was, in fact, bleeding them dry. The next morning, I emailed the deck to Ruth. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. My office? Now? I walked in. She had the deck open on her large monitor. Her face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her mouse. "What?" she hissed. "Is this—" "It's the pitch, Ruth," I said calmly. "Project perimeter." She read, her voice dripping sarcasm. "Unchecked access leads to brand dilution. Goodwill is not a strategy. Are you insane? Are you actively trying to get fired?" "It's a new framework," I said. "This is your personal drama," she snapped, standing up. "This is a pathetic, thinly veiled attack on Mason and your cousin. You are bringing your messy breakup into a pitch for our largest client. I will not allow it." I met her gaze. "This isn't a diary. Ruth, it's data." I pointed to the monitor. "The case study is anonymized, the framework is solid, and the numbers—" I tapped the glass. "Right on the 18% are from our own internal metrics, from Mark's projects. Actually, unless you're saying our data is wrong—" She froze. She was trapped. She couldn't argue with the data, and she couldn't admit why she recognized the anonymized case study without admitting she had received my stolen resume from Mason. She was utterly, completely cornered. "This is highly inappropriate," she stammered. I will not be presenting this. It's too aggressive." "I'm not asking you to," I said, turning to leave. "I'm presenting it. As a senior member of the pitch team, you'll have the final version by end of day." I left her office. The power dynamic had been irrevocably altered. I felt the victory. But it was incomplete. I was a risk analyst. Ruth was a cornered animal, and Mason was still out there. "They'll try to steal it," I told Elias back at the suite. "She'll give the deck to Mark, try to pass it off as his, or she'll give it to Mason to find a way to discredit me." "Then set another trap," Elias said, not looking up from his reading. I got to work. Mason was locked out of my primary cloud drive, my work email, my banking, but he wasn't locked out of everything. We had shared a personal Google Drive, a secondary backup account I used for recipes, vacation photos, and old college papers. He still had access. He probably assumed I'd forgotten about it. I took the Project Perimeter deck. I uploaded it to that drive, but it was a different version, a digital Trojan horse. I embedded a new set of invisible watermark tracers in the metadata. I inserted a tracking pixel in the file itself, and I changed one tiny thing. On slide 7, in the financial chart, I changed a single data point, not the 18% figure, but one of the inputs, a number in a dense column that was visually indistinguishable, but digitally distinct. A new typo trap, this one numerical. I baited the hook. I didn't have to wait long. I sat at the mahogany table, watching my activity log. 2 hours later, ping, access detected, my stomach tightened. Project Perimeter v2.pdf, opened by Zoe, personal, backup Gmail, com, but I wasn't logged into that account. I checked the access log. The IP address was masked, routed through a public coffee shop Wi-Fi network, but the device ID, the unique digital fingerprint of the machine, it was one I recognized. It was Mason's laptop. He was still watching me. He was still trying to get in, and he had just taken the bait. He had stolen the deck, again. He had just handed me the final, irrefutable link in the chain, his active, willing participation in corporate espionage, all at Ruth's direction. I looked at the screen, the proof of the second leak. Elias finally looked up. He saw the cold satisfaction on my face. "He took it," I said. "He has the compromised file. I've got them." Elias nodded. "Once. Good. The pitch is in 3 days. Do not show your hand. Let them think they have the stolen advantage. Let them prepare to fight the woman you used to be." The stipulated judgment, delivered electronically at 9 a.m., detonated their fragile conspiracy. The deadline to sign was 5 p.m. Failure to sign meant the immediate filing of criminal charges for identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. My phone, which I had placed on the suite's heavy mahogany desk, began to vibrate. It didn't stop for an hour. It was a percussion of panic, dozens of calls. Kira, Mason, Cynthia Dallow, Mason's father. They left frantic, sputtering voicemails. They sent a barrage of texts that cycled through confusion, indignation, and finally, terror. I listened to none of them. I was busy working on the Project Perimeter pitch, refining the data, sharpening the argument. The legal matter was a distraction, a piece of administrative cleanup. The real battle was the one for my career, the one Ruth Calder and Mason were now actively trying to sabotage. Elias sat across from me, reading analyst reports, seemingly oblivious to the drama. He had provided the tools. He expected me to use them. At 2 p.m., the front desk intercom chimed. "Ms. Foster," the concierge said, his voice discreet. "Akira Hale is in the lobby. She is quite distressed. She insists she is your family and that you are expecting her." I closed my laptop. The performance had begun. "Tell her," I said, my voice perfectly flat, "that I will meet her in the coffee shop across the street in 5 minutes. Zoe, you can't," Kira wailed, launching herself at me as I walked through the cafe door. She had managed to make herself look wrecked. Her hair was greasy, her eyes puffy, her clothes slept in. It was a good performance. I sidestepped her lunge, and she stumbled. "Sit down, Kira." I chose a small, hard table in the center of the room, far from the walls. I bought 2 black coffees and placed one in front of her. She ignored it. "They're going to arrest me," she sobbed, loud enough for the barista to look over. "Zoe, please, you have to stop this. It was a mistake. Mason's mom, she just wanted a place for them. And you were never there. I just wanted to be like you." The old Zoe would have crumbled. The old Zoe would have felt the stab of pity, the corrosive guilt of having more than her chaotic cousin. The new Zoe just watched, as if observing a poorly structured focus group. "I just need a place to stay," Kira bargained, her tears slowing as she saw her first tactic had failed. "Just for a week, Zoe, just 1 week. I have nowhere to go. They're going to evict us. Please, I'll sleep on the floor. I'm your family." I took a sip of my coffee. "No." "What?" "No," I said again, my voice quiet. "You will not be staying with me. Not for a week. Not for a night." But I'll be on the street." I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a wallet, or tissues, or anything soft. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. She unfolded it. Her tears stopped instantly. It was a spreadsheet. On the top half, a list of line items. Fraudulent department store card $5,000, $210. Fraudulent cell phone contract cancellation fee $1,000, $500. Lease violation penalty, 2 months rent, $6,400. Anticipated legal fees. Forensic audit, $10,000. At the bottom, in bold, red font, was the total. Kira looked at the number. She looked physically ill. I can't pay this. This is insane." "That," I said, "is the price of your help. That is what you stole from me. You, Mason, and his parents are jointly and severally liable, which means If they can't pay, you do. You're. Now look at the bottom half, I said. She lowered her gaze. The bottom half was titled, Repayment Work Source Plan. I took the liberty of reviewing your employment history, I said, my voice as calm as if I were describing a quarterly report. Your skill set is primarily in data entry and basic administration. I have identified 3 temp agencies that have immediate openings for evening shift medical transcription. I have also found a catering company that needs weekend staff. If you work both jobs, and we garnish 50% of your wages, you can pay your share of this debt off in approximately 36 months. Kira stared at the paper, her mouth open. The victim mask had fallen away, revealing the stunned, petulant child beneath. You're cruel, she whispered, her voice venomous. You're actually cruel, after everything my mom did for you when you're mom. You're a monster. Zoe. I finished my coffee and stood up. No, Kira. For my entire life, I have been accommodating, I have been nice, I have been ambiguous, because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That ambiguity is what you and Mason used to justify this. You saw it as a void you could fill. You mistook my kindness for an absence of boundaries. I put on my coat. From now on, I will be cruel to ambiguity. This is not ambiguous. This is clear. You will sign the judgment by 5 p.m. You will start the first temp job on Monday. Or you will be in a holding cell by midnight, facing a felony charge. That is the only choice you have left. I left her there, staring at the plan that would define the next 3 years of her life. When I returned to the suite, I felt a grim, cold satisfaction. The next call, I decided I would take. It was Mason. I let it ring 3 times, then answered, putting it on speaker. Zoe. Zoe. Oh my God. Baby. Finally. His voice was a panicked rush. You have to stop this. You have to call your lawyers. This is a nightmare. Kira is a mess. My parents are. Zoe, I was just trying to help. The word hung in the air. Help. The word he had used to justify his deception, his weakness. You were helping, I stated. Yes. You've been so stressed, working crazy hours. I thought if my parents were there, if Kira was there, they could take care of things, take the pressure off you, give you a break. I just wanted to help us. It was just a stupid idea that got out of hand. Please, Zoe, don't do this to me, to us. The gaslighting was so reflexive, so practiced. He probably almost believed it. I said nothing. I turned to my laptop, where the forensics team had neatly filed all their findings. I opened a folder labeled 1214, Living Room Feed. I clicked on a file. Help, I repeated. I held my phone's microphone up to the laptop's speaker, and I hit play. The tinny, awful sound of Mason's voice filled the silent, expensive room. It was from 2 days ago, before I had returned from River Forge. Okay, it's angled at the couch. His voice whispered on the recording. She'll definitely sit there when she finds the boxes. It'll get her whole reaction. Kira, you just need to start crying as soon as she walks in. Just say she abandoned you. Okay, Mom. Mom, you be ready with the lease papers. We have to present a totally united front. She'll break. She always does. I stopped the recording. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the sound of a man's entire reality being vaporized. He hadn't just been caught. He had been documented. Mason, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You have until 5 p.m. to sign the stipulated judgment. If you do not, that recording, along with the server logs showing you downloading my watermarked pitch deck from the shared drive, will be sent to the district attorney, the board of Helio Quarry Brands, and the head of your IT department. We are finished here. I hung up before he could find his voice. My phone buzzed again, almost immediately. A text message, this time from Cynthia Dallow. I don't know what kind of con game you're playing, but you are tearing this family apart. You are ungrateful. Mason loves you, and we were trying to build a home for him. Families are supposed to make sacrifices for their sons. You are being selfish and disrespectful, and you will regret this. I read the words. Selfish. Ungrateful. Families are supposed to. For a second, a phantom pang of the old guilt, the old programming, tightened my chest. The fear of being the difficult one, the one who broke the family, Elias, who had been watching me, slid a piece of his heavy cream-colored stationery across the desk. He had written a single sentence on it in a strong, clear script. Choosing them or choosing yourself is not a binary problem, it is a matter of sequence. I read the note, then I read Cynthia's text again. Sequence, for 31 years. I had put them first, their comfort, their needs, their fragile egos. I had sequenced myself last, and they had come to see it not as a gift, but as my proper place. I picked up my phone. I went to Cynthia's contact. Block. I went to Mason's. Block. I went to Kira's. Block. I silenced all notifications except for those from Harbor Pike and Elias. The vibrating on the desk stopped. The suite was finally completely quiet. I turned back to my laptop. Project Perimeter. I had a pitch to win. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream of deadlines, or arguments, or of falling. I slept for 8 solid, uninterrupted hours. I woke up to the sun rising over the harbor, and I felt, for the first time, not just rested, but ready. At 4:55 p.m., just 5 minutes before the deadline, the email arrived from the opposing counsel. Attached were the executed signature pages for the stipulated judgment. Mason, Kira, and Mason's parents had all signed. They had capitulated. They had agreed to vacate the apartment within 48 hours. They had agreed to the full repayment schedule. They had agreed to the permanent restraining order. They had agreed to surrender their devices for a forensic wipe. They had, in writing, confessed to fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. I felt a click, a sense of a lock snapping into place. But it wasn't victory. It was just the end of the first skirmish. I was in a temporary office at Harbor Pike, a glass-walled room overlooking the financial district. Elias was not there. He had made it clear this was my operation. He was the investor. I was the CEO. The lead forensic investigator, the woman with the firm handshake, knocked and entered, holding a tablet. Ms. Foster, we've got a problem with the lease addendum. They signed, I said, holding up the email. It's done. It's not about the confession, she said, pulling up a document. It's about the metadata, the document they used to commit the fraud, the co-lease agreement. I looked at the screen. It's a standard building template. Mason probably got it from the management office. No, she said, shaking her head. She zoomed in on the document properties. It's not. The building management uses a simple Microsoft Word template. We pulled their copy. This, she tapped the screen, is a professional legal document created with specialized drafting software. The formatting, the clauses, it's custom work. This wasn't made by Mason. A new cold thread of inquiry began to pull. They hired a lawyer. A cheap one, she said. Or a freelancer. The software signature in the metadata points to a freelance paralegal service, someone named Jax Morrell. The name meant nothing to me. So they outsourced the fraud. It's clean, the investigator said, her voice tight with professional admiration. Jax Morrell operates as a document specialist on freelance sites, cash or crypto payments. He drafts things for people who don't want a law firm's paper trail. Can you find him? We already did, she said, smiling. We cross-referenced his known crypto wallets with his public Venmo account. People are sloppy. He cashed out a payment 3 days ago, $500. From Mason. From a shell account. But the shell account was funded by a single wire transfer. We subpoenaed the originating bank. She turned the tablet to face me. My breath hitched. The transfer wasn't from Mason. It wasn't from Kira or Cynthia. The $500 payment to the paralegal who had drafted the fraudulent lease had come from a savings account belonging to Ruth Calder, my boss. I stared at the screen. The pieces didn't just click, they slammed together with the force of a car crash. This wasn't Mason's idea. He was just a pawn, a weak link to be exploited. This wasn't Kira's greedy opportunism. This entire thing, the lockout, the gaslighting, the hidden camera, it was an execution. Ruth wanted me gone, not just sidelined. She wanted me broken. She wanted me to have a public, verifiable breakdown, to be forced to take a leave of absence, to be so mired in personal and financial chaos that I would be permanently removed from the running for the North Alder Trust account. She wanted to force my burnout. She had supplied the legal weapon, the $500 fraudulent lease. She had given it to Mason, her inside man, who in turn had used his weak-willed family as a home invasion force, and she had stolen my resume to ensure she knew my weaknesses. The motive? I said aloud. It was the pitch. She wanted to clear the field for Mark. She wanted you declared unstable, the investigator confirmed. It's a classic corporate removal, and she used your boyfriend as the trigger. The rage I felt was so pure, so cold. It was almost serene. It was the clarity of absolute zero. Appendix R, I said. The investigator looked at me. I'm sorry. The Helioquarry Employee Handbook, I said, already dialing my lawyer on the desk phone. Appendix R. Immediate prosecution if a manager instigates, co-conspires, or facilitates fraudulent off-hours conduct, regardless of employee consent. I got the senior partner from Harbor Pike on the line. I have a new target, I said. Ruth Calder. I have a direct wire transfer receipt linking her to the creation of the fraudulent document that started this. I am invoking Appendix R. I want a full data preservation order served on Helioquarry brands immediately. HR will try to bury this, the lawyer cautioned. They'll want a quiet settlement, a non-disclosure agreement. They will protect the manager. Let them try, I said. The next morning, I walked into the Human Resources Department at Helioquarry Brands. I had requested a meeting with the head of HR, a man named Donovan. Zoe, he said, offering a weak, politician's smile. I'm so glad you're feeling better. Ruth told me you were going through a terrible personal episode. My personal episode is now a criminal matter. Donovan, I said. I sat down, placed my phone on the desk between us, and slid a single piece of paper across. It was the wire transfer receipt. He read it. The color drained from his face. This is a very serious allegation. Zoe, clearly, there's a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, I said. Ruth Calder, a senior manager, paid a paralegal to draft a fraudulent document. She then conspired with another employee, Mason Dallow, to use that document to illegally evict me, steal my identity, and compromise my position at this company. That is a direct, flagrant violation of Appendix R of our own corporate code of conduct. Donovan leaned back, his mask of concern replaced by a wary, calculating look. Zoe, what do you want? This is messy. For the firm? For you. An internal investigation. Lawyers? It's ugly. Surely we can find a more harmonious path forward, a way for you to feel whole without detonating the department. A harmonious path, I repeated. You mean a settlement. You mean you want me to sign an NDA and take some blood money to stay quiet? I mean, he said, choosing his words carefully, that the company values both you and Ruth. We are prepared to make a significant gesture of goodwill to compensate you for your distress, a promotion, perhaps, a new title, a transfer to the West Coast office, with a significant raise. You could put all this behind you. He was trying to buy me, to bury the crime. No, I said. Zoe, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. I am invoking Appendix R. I expect a full, transparent investigation, and I expect Ruth Calder to be suspended, pending that investigation. If I do not have confirmation of that suspension by end of day, Harbor Pike are authorized to file a civil suit naming both Ruth and Helioquarry Brands as co-conspirators in a felony fraud. I stood up. The time for harmonious paths is over. Donovan, do your job. I left his office. Less than an hour later, an email blast went out. Ruth Calder will be taking an unexpected personal leave of absence, effective immediately. Simultaneously, the lawyers from Harbor Pike served the data preservation order. Helio Quarry was now legally obligated to freeze all of Ruth's communications, her email, her Slack messages, her hard drive. The trap was set. I knew she would panic. I knew she wouldn't trust HR to fix it. She called me at 4 p.m. from a private number. "You," she hissed. Her voice was no longer smooth. It was ragged with fury. "You stupid, stupid little girl. What did you do?" I was in the hotel suite. I pressed the record button on my laptop's audio interface. The state of New Alder, conveniently, was a one-party consent state for recordings. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Ruth, don't play dumb. You went to HR, you're trying to ruin me. You paid Jax Morrell $500 to draft a fraudulent lease." "Ruth," I said calmly, "you gave it to Mason. You set this whole thing in motion because you wanted me out of the running for the North Alder pitch. I didn't do anything but expose the truth." There was a long silence. Then, a shift. The panic was replaced by the old, familiar condescension. "Zoe, listen to me. You are smart. I've always said that. You're smart. But you're not a killer. You don't know how this game is played. You've made your point. You're back on the pitch team. Fine." She took a breath. This was it. The bribe. "You help me clean this up. You tell HR it was a misunderstanding, that Mason manipulated both of us. I'll make you director. Not analyst. Director of risk. A 50% raise. You can write your own ticket. We can crush the North Alder pitch. Together. This all just goes away. It's just business." "A 50% raise," I repeated. "And a new title, in exchange for committing perjury and covering up your felony. I'm offering you a career." "Zoe," she shrieked, "don't be a fool." "Thank you for clarifying your position." "Ruth," I said, "I have everything I need now." I hit stop on the recording. I hung up the phone. While all this was happening, the forensic investigator had been finalizing her report. The litigation hold on Mason's devices had provided the final, missing piece. She called me. "We've got the paper trail from Jax Morrell," she said. "We already have that," I said. "It led to Ruth." "Yes, but it led to Mason first. Jax didn't just get a wire transfer. He got an envelope of cash. We pulled the security footage from the parking garage where he meets his clients. 2 days before the eviction, there's Mason, on camera, handing Jax Morrell a thick envelope. The wire transfer from Ruth was just the deposit. Mason paid him the balance, in cash, in a public parking garage. Mason wasn't just a pawn, he was the bag man. The moment I hung up, my phone, which I had unblocked for this very purpose, rang. It was Mason. He was clearly calling from his lawyer's office. I could hear the muffled voice of an attorney in the background. He wasn't calling to gaslight me. He was broken. "Zoe, please." He was weeping. Not the crocodile tears of his previous call, but the raw, abject terror of a man who had been completely and totally cornered. They just sent the footage, the garage, with Jax. I didn't know. Ruth. She told me it was just a standard lease agreement, that she was helping. I didn't know he was... Oh God. Zoe, this is a criminal charge. This isn't just a fight. I'm going to jail. He was panicking. The stipulated judgment he had signed only covered the civil fraud. This new evidence, the cash handoff. The conspiracy with Jax was purely criminal. He was facing prosecution. "Please, Zoe," he begged. "I'll do anything. Anything. Don't let them prosecute. I'll testify against Ruth. I'll give you everything. Just, please don't send me to prison." I listened to him beg. I let the silence stretch out. Elias had asked me what I wanted. I wanted a clean victory. I wanted a public acknowledgement. "You already signed the judgment, Mason," I said. I know. But this is new. Please, whatever you want, I'll sign whatever you want." I looked at the legal pad in front of me. I had already written down the words. We'll add an addendum to the stipulated judgment, I said, my voice like steel. You will not be prosecuted for the criminal conspiracy. In exchange, you will do one more thing. Anything, he sobbed. My building is having its quarterly tenants association meeting. It's next week. It's mandatory for all residents in the building. You and I said, are going to attend, and you are going to stand up in front of all of my neighbors, and you are going to read a statement, a public, formal, videotaped apology. You are going to admit, on camera, to every single thing you did. He was silent. In the background, I heard his lawyer shout, Absolutely not. That is the deal, Mason, I said. A public confession, or a criminal prosecution. You have 10 minutes to decide. I hung up. Elias walked into the room, holding 2 cups of tea. He hadn't been in the office, but he had clearly been informed. He moved through the world like a ghost, connected to everything. He looked at me, at the phone, at the audio file of Ruth's confession saving on my laptop. He had not once appeared at Helio Quarry. To them, he was just a name on the North Alder Trust's advisory board, a quiet consultant for the fund. He had not intervened. He had only observed. The pitch is tomorrow, he said, placing the tea in front of me. I'm ready, I said. My phone chimed. An email from Mason's lawyer. We agreed to the terms of the addendum. The Tenants Association meeting was held in the building's sterile community room on the ground floor. It was a place that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and instant coffee. 50 or 60 residents were crammed into folding chairs, listening to the building manager, a tired-looking man named Dave, drone on about recycling protocols. I sat in the front row. My lawyer from Harbor Pike sat 2 seats away, his briefcase on his lap, observing. Mason sat in a single, isolated chair placed at the front of the room, facing the audience. He was wearing a wrinkled suit, his face a sickly pale gray. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. And finally, Dave said, consulting his agenda, his voice betraying his confusion, we have a community clarification. Per the terms of a legal agreement, Mr. Mason Dallow has a statement to read. This is being recorded for the building's legal records. Dave pointed a small camcorder, balanced on a tripod. At Mason, a red light blinked on. Mason's hands were shaking so badly he could barely unfold the single piece of paper in his lap. It was the addendum, the statement his lawyer and mine had finalized. He began to read, his voice a dry croak. My name is Mason Dallow, he recited, his eyes fixed on the paper. For the past month, I engaged in a campaign of fraud and deception against a resident of this building, Zoe Foster. A murmur went through the crowd. My neighbors, people I'd nodded to in the elevator, turned to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. I conspired to have Ms. Foster illegally evicted from her own apartment, he read, his voice cracking. I used a fraudulent lease document to do this. I changed the locks, and I moved my family, my parents and my cousin, Kira Hale, into her home without her knowledge or consent. He was choking on the words. His lawyer, in the back, watched him like a hawk. I also, he paused, squeezing his eyes shut. I installed a hidden camera in her living room to record her, in violation of her privacy. I stole her digital signature to authorize the fraudulent lease. I and my family are fully responsible for all damages, penalties, and legal fees. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate and malicious act, he finished. The silence in the room was absolute, thick and horrified. I apologize, he whispered, to Ms. Foster, and to the residents of this building, for this. It is done. He folded the paper, and in that awful, stunned silence, a voice shrieked from the back of the room. He's lying. She's making him say this. Kira. She burst through the door, her face blotchy and furious. She looked even worse than she had at the coffee shop. She's a monster. She's my sister, my cousin, and she's doing this. She's destroying us. She forced him to sign that. She's evil. She was appealing to the crowd. Playing the last card, she had the hysterical, wronged family member. I didn't turn around. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke to the building manager. Dave, I said, my voice calm. Could you please ask Ms. Hale if she has found employment yet? Kira stopped, stunned. What? I turned in my chair, very slowly, and looked at her. Kira, you have, as of this morning, 12 outstanding, fraudulent bills in your name, all of which are now your sole responsibility. You also have the work-share plan I created for you. I suggest you stop this performance and start making calls. The catering company is hiring for the weekend. You are late on your first payment. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. The words bills, work-share plan, payment were a language she couldn't argue with. They were cold, hard, and public. Her victimhood narrative evaporated. Get out, I said, not unkindly. You are trespassing. Kira looked at the faces of my neighbors, all staring at her, not with pity, but with a new, dawning disgust. She turned and fled. My lawyer stood up. He placed a new document and a pen on the table in front of Mason. Mr. Dallow, the final attestation, acknowledging your statement was made freely and agreeing to the full schedule of costs, including reputational damages. Mason signed the paper, his hand dragging across the page. The next morning, the video of his confession was posted to the building's private online portal by the management, under the heading Resolution of Security Breach in Unit 1214. My apartment had been professionally cleaned, my locks were changed, my lawyer had the new keys, but I wasn't going back. Not yet. The battle for my home was over. The war for my career was now fully engaged. The email from HR confirming Ruth's suspension had been a small victory. But I knew it wasn't the end. Ruth was a manager. The company would, by default, try to protect itself from the liability she had created. And then it came. An anonymous email, sent from a Proton Mail account, landed in the inboxes of the entire Helio Quarry executive board, including the CEO. It was short, and it was poison. Subject unfair advantage. North Alder Trust pitch. It has come to our attention that Zoe Foster, a junior analyst, is being given preferential treatment in the North Alder pitch. Her recent promotion to the pitch team and the removal of her manager, Ruth Calder, were not based on merit. Ms. Foster's grandfather is Elias Rothwell, the chairman of the Rothwell Holdings Board, which controls the North Alder Trust. She is using her family connection to unfairly influence the pitch, oust her superiors, and secure the contract. This is a clear case of nepotism and corporate corruption. The email was forwarded to me by a colleague. Her only comment, a shocked Zoe. They had found him, Ruth, or her allies, had dug deep enough to find the connection. They had found my one vulnerability. They were changing the narrative. I wasn't a victim of a corporate conspiracy. I was the perpetrator of one. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was a move I hadn't anticipated. It was brilliant. It was fatal. I called Elias. I read him the email. He was silent for a long moment. "Where are you?" he asked. "In the hotel suite." "Meet me," he said. "The diner. In River Forge. 1 hour." I drove. I took the same road I had taken less than 2 weeks ago, the road that had been my escape. This time, I was driving into the heart of the problem. The diner was quiet. It was mid-afternoon. Noah, the waiter, was wiping down the counter. He saw me and his eyes went wide, clearly remembering the woman who had fled into the snow. Elias was in the same booth I had sat in, the one where I had marked up my resume. He had a cup of coffee in front of him. I slid in opposite him. "He recognized you," I said, nodding to Noah. "I paid for his semester's tuition," Elias said, waving the comment away. "He's a good boy. He held on to the resume." I looked at the man who had torn through a blizzard to find me. the man who had given me the keys to a legal and financial arsenal I couldn't have imagined. "They know," I whispered. "Elias, they know about you. They're telling the board I'm using you, that Ruth was framed, that I'm just a product of nepotism. I've lost. The pitch is compromised." "Do you believe that?" he asked. He wasn't angry. He was curious. "Of course not. The project perimeter deck is solid. The data it's irrefutable." "Then the deck is your answer," he said. "This," he tapped the table, "is what they expect. Whispers, back channels, a quiet word from the chairman. They think you are old money. They think you are weak. They are projecting their own desires onto you. They believe that if they had your connections, they would use them. So, they assume you are—" He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "If they think you have a grandfather pulling the strings, let them. It makes them sloppy. It makes them focus on the wrong thing. They will be busy trying to find evidence of my influence, of my calls, of my interference. They will find none, because there is none." He pointed a finger at me. "You will let the results, not the relationship, be the answer. You will submit that deck. You will not add my name. You will not add a reference. You will submit it as Zoe Foster. Analyst, you will let the work speak for itself, in the cold, clear light of day. Let them look for ghosts. You will show them the numbers." I took a deep breath. The panic was receding. He was right. He wasn't giving me a fish. He was teaching me how to drain the ocean. "The pitch," I said. "The final version is due today." "Then you had better get to it," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. I went back to the Harbor Pike office. I opened the final file, Project Perimeter, Z. Foster. I attached it to a new email. The recipients were the official, blind inbox for the North Alder Trust Selection Committee. I hit send, no introduction, no signature block, just the file. The next 2 days were a vacuum. I worked from the hotel, finalizing the cleanup of my old apartment. The legal team served the final device wipe notices to Mason and Kira. They were, effectively, erased from my life. Then, the email came. It was from the North Alder Trust Committee. "Dear applicants, we thank you for your submissions. We have narrowed the field to 3 finalists. The following teams are invited to present to the board." My name was on the list. I was a finalist, but I wasn't the only one. There were 2 other agencies, both large, established firms. My phone lit up. It was my colleague at Helio Quarry. "Zoe," she whispered, "you're in. You're actually in. But it's a mess here. The board is completely divided." The anonymous email. It worked. Half of them think you're a plant. The other half think the data is too good to ignore. "What about Ruth?" I asked. "That's the crazy part," my colleague said. "A rumor just leaked. She's planning on holding a press conference or releasing a public statement, something about for the good of the company and clearing her name." I laughed. A real, actual laugh. A press conference. "What's so funny?" my colleague asked. "She's going to accuse you of nepotism publicly." "Let her," I said, a smile spreading across my face. I thought of the audio file sitting on my laptop, the one of Ruth, in her own panicked voice, offering me a 50% raise and a directorship to cover up her felony. "Let her say whatever she wants," I said. "Just make sure Appendix R is listening." The night before the North Alder Trust presentation was a vacuum. The chaos of the past 2 weeks, the eviction, the legal filings, the corporate espionage had settled into a dense, pressurized silence. I was in Elias's suite, which now felt more like a command center than a home. My presentation, Project Perimeter, was open on my laptop. It was lean, precise, and contained exactly 0 adjectives that could be described as warm. I was running through the data on slide 3, cross-referencing my savings model with Mark's historical overages, when my personal cell phone, the one I kept active purely as a data collection device, lit up. It was Kira. I had blocked her number, but she was calling from a new one, a prepaid burner. I let it ring, but the sheer persistence, The rapid-fire call-hang-up call sequence was a new level of desperation. Curious. I answered. I put it on speaker and hit record. Zoe. Oh my God. Zoe, please. She wasn't crying. She was hyperventilating. It was a raw, ugly sound, devoid of the performance she'd used in the coffee shop. This was real. You have to help me. You have to. Help you with what, Kira? I asked. My voice was flat. He kicked me out. The guy I was staying with, he said he got a call from a lawyer about my debts, about the fraud. He said he doesn't want to be involved. And he took all the money I had. He said it was for rent, and he kicked me out. She was spiraling, the consequences of her actions creating a chain reaction I had no part in. That sounds like a personal problem. Kira? But I have nothing, she shrieked. I'm at a bus station. I have $22, Zoe. Please. I'm your family. You did this. You put this all on me. The bills. I can't. She dissolved into a wail. Just send me $500. Just $500, so I can get a room, please. The old me. The girl who had always been the rescuer. The one who paid for Kira's textbooks, her car repairs, her bad decisions. She was a ghost in the room. I could feel her, wanting to fix it. I silenced her. No, I said. What? No, I will not be sending you money. I suggest you consult the repayment plan. The catering company is, as I recall, hiring. You? She was sputtering, the sobs replaced by a cold, reptilian rage. I hope you fail. I hope you die alone in this rich. I hung up. I added the new number to my block list. The phone rang again, almost immediately. A different unknown number. I answered. Speaker. Record. You're a cold, hard bitch, aren't you? The voice was gravelly, thick with malice. Cynthia Dallow, Mason's mother. I don't know who you think you are, she spat. Coming after my son, ruining his life. She paused, and I could hear her breathing. We know where you're staying. We know about that fancy hotel. You think you're safe up there? It was a threat, a clumsy, stupid, desperate threat from a woman who had lost her free apartment. You think you can just hide, she continued. I didn't say a word. I picked up the desk phone and dialed my lawyer at Harbor Pike. I put him on speaker, holding my cell phone next to the receiver. And we're not going to just let you. Cynthia was ranting. Excuse me? My lawyer's voice cut in, sharp as a razor. Who is this? Cynthia stopped. The silence was total. This is, my lawyer continued, his voice dangerously smooth. Counsel for Zoe Foster. I am recording this call, which I am now identifying as a direct, actionable threat against my client. This is a violation of the stipulated judgment and the restraining order. Thank you. Ms. Dallow, we will be filing for immediate sanctions with the court in the morning. Good night. He hung up. Cynthia's line was still open. I could hear her sharp, panicked breathing. Then, a click. I put my cell phone down. The suite was quiet again. I turned back to my laptop. Slide 4, the no-scope creep framework. My phone buzzed. A text. This time, from Mason. His number wasn't blocked. It was just archived. A digital evidence locker. Zoe, my mom is a mess. You're destroying my family. For what? An apartment. Just be a decent person. Be the person I used to know. Call this off. I read the text. The attempt to paint me as the aggressor. Him as the victim. The nostalgia for the woman I used to be, the woman he could manipulate. I didn't reply. 5 minutes passed. My phone buzzed again. Mason. Fine. Fuck you. You and your rich old man. You think you've won? You're nothing. You're a cold, empty bitch. I hope you lose everything. I took a screenshot of the 2-message sequence. Be a decent person. Fuck you. I emailed the screenshot to my lawyer with the subject line, "For the file." The next morning, the day of the pitch, I was dressed and ready by 7 a.m. I was in the lobby, waiting for a car, when the hotel's head of security, a man who now nodded to me with a respectful deference, approached. "Ms. Foster," he said quietly, "there is a disturbance at your office at Helioquarry Brands. Our security liaison there just called. It's about you." A disturbance. A young woman, Kira Hale. She's in the main lobby, screaming. She's demanding to see you, saying you've ruined her life and stolen her money. She's making quite a scene. I pictured it. The glass lobby, the corporate art, and Kira, at the center of it, finally, fully imploding. She was trying to sabotage my presentation, to have me walk into my own office building through a gauntlet of my own personal drama. The old me would have rushed over, to calm her down, to appease her, to manage the optics. "Is the Helioquarry security team handling it?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. They're trying to remove her. She's not cooperating." "Thank you for the update," I said. "My car is here. I'm heading to the North Alder Trust building." You're not going to your office?" he asked, surprised. "No," I said. "It's not my problem. She's a non-employee trespassing on private property. Security can handle it." I walked out the revolving door. For the first time in my life, I was letting someone else's life, someone else's choices, follow their own natural, disastrous inertia. I was not the rescuer. I was not the cleanup crew. I was not responsible for the fire I didn't start. As the car pulled into traffic, my phone rang. A private number. I let it go to voicemail, but they called back immediately. I answered. "Zoe?" It was Ruth. Her voice was unrecognizable. The polished, sharp, managerial tone was gone. It was a dry, terrified whisper. "Zoe, please, you have to listen to me." "I'm listening, Ruth," I said. It was a setup," she said, the words tumbling out. "Mason, he came to me. He told me you were unstable, that you were on the verge of a breakdown. He tricked me. The lease, the paralegal, that was his idea. He said it was to help you, to force you to take a break. I was just trying to protect the account." The lie was so desperate, so flimsy. It was almost pathetic. She was trying to pin her own conspiracy, the conspiracy I had her confessing to on tape on Mason. "He set me up," she pleaded. "Ruth," I interrupted. My voice was calm, measured. I felt no anger. I felt nothing at all. "Nobody sets up an honest person." I hung up the phone. I turned it off. The rest of the drive was silent. I didn't look at the city. I looked at my notes. That night, I had rehearsed the pitch a final time, not in front of a mirror, but to the empty dark glass of the suite's window. It was 10 minutes long. I had removed every single superlative, every piece of marketing fluff. There were no synergies, no activations, no deep dives. There was just data. There was just the framework. "Goodwill is a liability," I said to my reflection. "Brand loyalty is not built on accommodation. It is built on the predictable, reliable, and profitable execution of boundaries. Our Project Perimeter framework is not a marketing strategy. It is a risk mitigation model that redefines brand integrity." I clicked to the next slide. This model, based on an 18% reduction in verified scope creep, I finished, 10 minutes, on the dot, my phone, the one Elias had given me, buzzed on the nightstand. A single text message from him. "Be on time. Don't apologize for your talent." I looked out the window. The snow, which had been falling as a light, agitated flurry all evening, had finally stopped. The city was silent, covered in a clean, white, undisturbed blanket. The storm was over. The boardroom for the North Alder Trust was on the 42nd floor, a space designed to intimidate. It was a long, dark room, dominated by a single, monolithic slab of polished granite that served as a table. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the Boston Harbor, but the light was absorbed by the dark mahogany walls. Seated at the table were the 12 members of the selection committee. They were impassive, severe, and looked impossibly old. I was the last to present. The first team, from a large, established Boston agency, was a 5-person entourage. They were slick, they had multimedia, glossy leave-behinds, and a presentation full of warm, fuzzy words like synergy, legacy, and partnership. They were, in essence, a more expensive version of Mark's stability pitch. The second team, from a lean digital-first firm, was all data, but no soul. They talked about conversion funnels and KPI optimization, but had no central thesis. Then, they called my name. Helio Quarry Brands, Ms. Zoe Foster. I walked to the front of the room, alone. I had no entourage. I had no glossy binders. I had my laptop, which I plugged into the system, and a single file. The whispers were audible. They were expecting a team. They saw a lone, 31-year-old analyst. They saw the name from the anonymous email. I could feel their skepticism, their suspicion, pressing in on me. I stood at the podium. I looked at each of them. I did not smile. I clicked to my first slide. It was just white text on a black background. Good morning. Businesses do not fail from a lack of opportunity. They fail by saying yes too much, too soon. I let the sentence hang in the air. My name is Zoe Foster, and my thesis is that North Alder Trust is at risk, not from the market, but from its own ambiguity. Your brand, your investments, and your partnerships are suffering from a lack of clearly defined, rigorously enforced boundaries. I clicked to the next slide. I am not here to sell you a marketing campaign. I am here to present a new operational model. I call it the Perimeter Playbook. For the next 8 minutes, I walked them through the 5 core principles. I did not use my personal life as an example. I didn't need to. The data was the story. I showed them the numbers from Helio Quarry's own files, Mark's files, the 18% overage and vanity spend, and scope creep that came from a stable relationship built on accommodation. The Perimeter Playbook, I concluded, is not about building walls. It is about building gates. It ensures that every partner, every vendor, and every new initiative has a clear, contractual, and finite purpose. It eliminates ambiguity. It eliminates scope creep. It makes your yes valuable because it is protected by 1,000 structural no's. I finished. The room was silent. A man at the far end of the table, one who had not looked up from his papers the entire time, finally spoke. His voice was like dry paper. Ms. Foster, a compelling thesis. However, the committee has been made aware of certain rumors. Here it was. Rumors, he continued, that these materials, this very deck, was compromised, leaked. I believe, how can you speak of boundaries and integrity when your own data is not secure? He was testing me. He was checking to see if I was a victim. I met his gaze. Thank you for that question. It speaks to the very heart of the framework. You are correct. An early, simplified draft of this proposal was, in fact, co-opted. A murmur went through the room. However, I continued, my voice cutting through it, the perimeter framework is not just a theory. We practice it. That initial file was digitally watermarked. We tracked its exfiltration, its destination, and its receipt in real time. It identified a security breach, which has since been fully contained and legally resolved. I leaned forward slightly. But more importantly, a second, different, compromised file was intentionally baited and placed in a secondary unsecured server. That, too, was tracked, downloaded, and recorded. We did not just suffer a breach. We conducted a successful penetration test of our own internal security. We have the logs. We have the data. My data integrity is the only reason we are aware of the problem at all. I had not raised my voice. I had not named Mason. I had not named Ruth. I had simply shown them that I was not the one who had been trapped. I was the one setting the traps. The man stared at me. He did not reply. A different woman, sharp and pragmatic, spoke up. That is all very abstract, Ms. Foster. Let's try a practical test. She looked at her notes. You are all finalists. We are now in an emergency situation. Let's say our board just mandated a 20% budget cut, effective today, but we must maintain all projected growth. Your predecessors, she nodded at the empty chairs of the other teams, asked for a week to model this. You have 90 seconds. What do you cut? This was the final exam. I took a breath. I would not cut from the core. The problem is not the budget. It is the allocation. First, I said, you immediately freeze all vanity spend. That is, all high-cost, low-conversion sponsorships, all executive-level brand conferences, and all third-party media buys that cannot demonstrate a direct conversion metric. This accounts for approximately 12% of the current bleed. Second, I continued, my cadence quickening, you reallocate the remaining 8% from paid media to owned media. You stop paying to rent an audience, and you invest in your own platform, your journals, your reports, your data. You become the source, not the advertiser. Third, you restructure all internal KPIs. You stop measuring awareness and engagement. Those are metrics of ambiguity. You measure one thing: qualified conversion. If a partner cannot deliver, their contract is reviewed under the new perimeter guidelines. I finished. That is how you cut 20% without losing growth. You convert your brand from a spender into an asset. I had done it in 60 seconds. The room was absolutely, profoundly silent. The woman who had asked the question stared at me. Her face was blank. And then, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her mouth. She nodded. Once, to herself. Thank you, Ms. Foster, the chairman said. We have your presentation. We will be in touch. I packed my laptop. I did not look at them. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, my heels clicking on the granite floor. The adrenaline was so high I felt lightheaded. I had done it. I had presented the data. I had answered the test. I had faced the accusation. I walked into the elevator lobby, and my stomach dropped. Ruth Calder was standing there. She was not on personal leave. She was here, in a power suit, her face a mask of furious, sallow rage. She must have used her old credentials to get into the building, to wait for me. You, she hissed, her voice a low vibration. You actually think you can win this. You think you can walk in there, a little analyst, and take this from me, from Mark. I said nothing. I just looked at her. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, she spat, taking a step toward me. With your anonymous grandfather, but it's over. I am filing a grievance with HR. I am suing you for defamation. I will. The ding of the elevator arriving cut her off. The doors opened. Elias Rothwell was standing inside. He was not in the suit I recognized. He was in a perfectly cut, dark blue pinstripe, holding a slim leather briefcase. He looked every inch the chairman. He looked at Ruth, his face blank. He looked at me, and he looked right through me. There was not a flicker of recognition, not a nod, not a hint of a smile. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a junior employee he had never seen before. He held his hand out to hold the elevator door, an impersonal, polite gesture to the empty space in front of him. Ruth, stunned into silence by his presence, did not move. I stepped into the elevator, careful not to brush against him. I stood on the other side. Floor 1, I said, my voice clear and cold, to the man I knew was my grandfather. He did not reply. He pressed the button for the lobby. The doors slid shut, sealing the three of us in a box of mirrored steel and unbearable silence. Ruth, left behind in the lobby, was just a blur of confused rage as the doors closed. The descent took 45 seconds. He did not speak. He did not look at me. He simply stared at the numbers as they counted down. The doors opened. He stepped out first. He turned right. I turned left. He did not look back. He had maintained his role. He was a stranger. He had not interfered. I was on my own. I was halfway back to the hotel, my mind replaying every second of the pitch, of Ruth's confrontation, of Elias's cold non-acknowledgement. When my phone chimed, an email from the North Alder Trust board secretary, subject North Alder Trust, final decision. My heart stopped. This was it. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Foster and finalists, we thank you for your compelling presentations. The committee has reviewed the scores from today's session. The final scoring has resulted in a statistical tie between all three applicants. A tie. A tie. After that, a tie. The nepotism email had worked. It had poisoned the well, creating a deadlock. The people who saw the data, like the woman who had smiled, were fighting the people who feared the politics. I read the next line. Due to this deadlock, the board has determined that a standard agency of record decision is insufficient. The choice will be escalated. A final, binding decision will be made at a closed-door emergency shareholder meeting of the Rothwell Holdings Family Council. This meeting is restricted to family principals and designated legal counsel only. My blood ran cold. A second email arrived. A minute later, it was not from the board. It was a calendar invitation. From Office of the Chairman, Rothwell Holdings Event, Rothwell Family Council, Closed Session. Attendees, Zoe Foster, Elias Rothwell, Harbor Pike, LLP. I was no longer an analyst from Helio Quarry. I had been summoned. I was an attendee, family. The Rothwell Holdings boardroom was not a place of business. It was a hall of judgment. The room was old, perhaps 200 years old, paneled in dark, almost black, oak. The air smelled of old leather, floor wax, and the sheer metallic weight of generational money. A single, 50-foot table dominated the space, and around it sat the family, a collection of aunts, uncles, and cousins I had never met. They were faces from a Gilded Age portrait, all sharp bones and skeptical eyes. I sat at the head of the table, to the left of the presiding chair. Elias sat to the right. My lawyer from Harbor Pike sat behind me, and across the table, looking pale and dangerously defiant, was Ruth Calder. She had been summoned. Next to her sat the Helio Quarry CEO and Donovan, the head of HR. They were here, ostensibly, to defend their company against the charge of harboring my nepotistic influence. There were 3 thick, cream-colored, wax-sealed envelopes on the table. An older woman, with Elias's gray eyes and a spine of steel, called the meeting to order. We are convened to resolve the deadlock regarding the North Alder Trust contract, she said, her voice like crisp parchment. This has ceased to be a simple vendor selection. It has become a question of values. She looked directly at me. The nepotism accusation has been leveled. Simultaneously, this contract decision has been linked to the new Rothwell Mentorship Initiative. The family is not just choosing an agency, we are choosing a potential heir to this initiative, and they must embody the values of this family. The implication was clear. I was on trial. Elias stood up. The room, which was already silent, became unnervingly still. I will address the conflict of interest rumor, he said, his voice quiet but filling the room. He picked up the first envelope. It is not a rumor, it is a fact. Zoe Foster is my granddaughter. A sharp intake of breath from the Helio Quarry delegation. But to understand the nature of this conflict, Elias continued, you must understand its history. He broke the seal. He did not pull out a business document. He pulled out a laminated birth certificate. Zoe Elara Foster, he read. Born 31 years ago. Mother Elena Rothwell, my daughter. He then pulled out a second, older document, a letter, its edges softened by time. And this, he said, his voice catching for just a fraction of a second, is a letter from my late wife, Zoe's grandmother, written 30 years ago, after I disowned my daughter for a marriage I deemed unsuitable. He read from the letter, Elias, This silence is a cancer. You were wrong to cast her out. Your pride is not worth our daughter's life. You must find her. You must find our granddaughter." He stopped reading. He placed the letter on the table. "I failed to do so until it was too late. I found my granddaughter 3 weeks ago, in a motel, in a blizzard. That is the nature of our relationship, not one of privilege, but one of a 30-year abandonment. That is the nepotism I am guilty of." The room was processing. The family looked at me, their skepticism replaced by a new, calculating curiosity. "That," Elias said, "establishes her blood. This—" He picked up the second envelope. "Establishes her character." Ruth Calder shot forward in her chair. Elias broke the second seal. He laid the contents out, one by one. "This is a wire transfer receipt for $500, from Ruth Calder to a freelance paralegal named Jax Morrell." Donovan and the CEO turned, horrified, to look at Ruth. "This," Elias continued, "is a security photograph from a parking garage, showing Mason Dallow delivering a cash balance to the same paralegal. And this," he placed a small digital audio recorder on the table, "is a legally obtained recording of Ms. Calder, in her own voice, offering Ms. Foster a 50% raise and a directorship in exchange for committing perjury and concealing these facts. This was not nepotism," Elias stated, his voice like ice. "It was a targeted, criminal conspiracy." Ruth found her voice. It was a shriek. "This is absurd. It's a setup, You're his grandfather. Of course you'd say that. You're biased. This is a complete conflict of interest. He's railroading me." Before Elias could speak, the lawyer from Harbor Pike stood up. "Mr. Rothwell is recusing himself from the final vote," the lawyer said. Ruth's face flashed with momentary victory. "However," the lawyer continued, "the bylaws of the North Alder Trust, which Mr. Rothwell did not write, are perfectly clear." He broke the third and final seal. "I am reading," the lawyer announced, "from Section 4, subsection C, the Integrity Clause. Should any applicant for a contract be found to be the target of unethical, fraudulent, or malicious sabotage by a competitor, the committee is empowered to do 2 things. 1, permanently disqualify the offending party and all its principals from any future business. 2, award a non-financial integrity bonus to the victim's final score." He looked at the stunned family council. "The sabotage is proven by a notarized chain of evidence. Per the bylaws, Ms. Ruth Calder and the Helio Quarry B team, led by Mark, are permanently disqualified. The statistical tie for the contract is therefore broken. The integrity bonus places Ms. Foster's proposal as the sole, undisputed winner." Checkmate. Donovan and the CEO were already on their feet, edging away from Ruth as if she were radioactive. Elias looked at me. His face was not proud, just steady. "We cannot choose the family that is past," he said, his voice echoing the note he had written. "But we can choose the standards we set today. The contract is yours. Zoe, will you accept it under the full scrutiny of this board, and without the protection of the Rothwell name?" This was the final test. All eyes were on me. Ruth was watching me, her face a mask of ruined hatred. I met Elias's gaze. "Yes," I said. My voice was clear, and it did not shake. "On 2 conditions. The contract is executed under my name Foster, and it is executed, to the letter, according to the perimeter playbook." The matriarch at the head of the table slammed her hand down. "So moved. Let the minutes reflect. The North Alder Trust contract is awarded to Helio Quarry Brands, to be led exclusively by the team under Ms. Zoe Foster. Furthermore, per the invocation of Appendix R, a formal recommendation for the immediate termination of Ruth Calder for gross misconduct is to be filed. This meeting is adjourned." Just as the stenographer was logging the final words, the heavy oak doors burst open. It was Mason and Kira. They looked frantic, disheveled, and completely out of place. They must have bluffed their way past security, thinking this was a family talk they could appeal. "We need to talk," Mason yelled. pointing, impossibly, at Elias. "This is a family matter. You can't just ruin us." Kira spotted me. Her face was a mess of tears and fury. "Zoe, tell them to stop. You've made your point. You won. Please, just stop." They were ghosts. They were a pathetic, desperate echo of the night they had invaded my home, still believing they could talk their way out of consequences, still believing they had a right to my space. Before I or Elias could even react, 2 large security guards in black suits grabbed them by the arms. "This is a closed meeting, sir," one guard said, hauling Mason back. "No, Zoe." "We're family," Kira wailed, her heels dragging on the carpet as she was pulled out. The heavy doors shut, muffling their cries. The room was silent again. The interruption had lasted less than 10 seconds. It was nothing. I had not looked away from the table. I had not flinched. My lawyer slid the final contract and a heavy weighted pen in front of me. I uncapped it. I signed my name, Zoe Foster. My breathing was deep and even, the ringing in my ears, the constant, anxious static I had lived with for years, was gone. The only sound was the scratching of the pen. I looked up. Elias was watching me, his gray eyes clear. He reached across the table and placed his hand, just for a moment, on mine. "That night," he said, his voice low, "just for me. I flew through a blizzard to find you. Today, you are the one who just led this entire family out of the fog." The stenographer's hands stopped. The final pen clicked. The screen goes dark. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Zoe's journey. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and if you want to see more stories like this, please hit that hype button to help it reach more people.